Hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you here on the Saturday. It's nice to be here on a Saturday. I don't know, it's no different for me. For those of us who are self-employed, Saturday is no different than Friday, but still, it's nice. My husband's home, so that's actually different from Friday. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi, JV. I'm already seeing some familiar names here. Muse of the Poets. Never Without Your Phone, Muse of the Poets, always here, and Mrs. Tyree as well. Welcome, everybody. City looks like a newbie here. Welcome, everybody. Colleen Patrick-Goudreau here from joyfulvegan.com. Debbie says, hi, Colleen, loved the evening meal invited in Oakland at Encuentro. Yes, I did post our dinner last night and did a quick scope of our dinner at Encuentro, my favorite restaurant, right here in my hometown of Oakland. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is a topic that I think is relevant for many, many people. It's probably the most common thing we hear. Hi, Colleen. So cool to see you. Hi, Rejoice. Do we just tap the screen to send hearts? Yes, you do. Hi from Australia. What time is it in Australia? I'm so glad this is actually relevant for Australia peeps. I was thinking of UK peeps and East Coast, West Coast in the United States, but Australia, what time is it there in Australia? Yes. Hi, Serena, welcome. I'm glad this is your first time. And yes, for those who are just joining us, again, my name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, and you can find me at joyfulvegan.com. And hearts are very important because they are a way for me to know that what I'm saying makes sense to you and that you like what I'm saying. Don't get carpal tunnel, but send as many hearts as you can if you want. And it also is a way that Periscope ranks scopes. So really helpful in terms of getting these scopes out there, and they do feature scopes, and perhaps ours will be featured sometime and more people will see it. Australia at 6:50 a.m. Well, that's great. That's really helpful to know. So that's a really good time. So I'm always looking for the right time to do these so that it's relevant for everybody. And Yevo43.com. I have not heard of that. And great. Well, welcome. So I wanted to do today's scope, today's broadcast on cheese. We'll probably do this many, many times. And of course, I've talked about this many, many times in my work, in my podcast, Food for Thought, in my books, in the 30-Day Vegan Challenge. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, 30-Day Vegan Challenge really is kind of your ultimate guide to making the transition. And of course, things that we're going to talk about today are in the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, including recipes. 6:50 a.m. in Australia. I'm up early. Yeah, well, it must be Sunday. Gouda. Okay, yes. Let's get to the substance of the thing here. Yes, very exciting. 9:50 in UK. I was aware of that. Maybe most people are out partying in the UK, but hopefully some people are home and interested in joining us. So, oh, that's so sweet. Sarah, thank you. Okay, Sarah. Okay, so let's just talk about this really. Let's get started here, and then I'll keep taking your questions as I see them. But I want to get to the substance here, and so many people say, I want to be vegan, but I could never give up X. And usually the X is cheese. And the first thing I want to say, the first tip I want to give you is then give up everything except cheese. Now, I know that probably sounds counter to a vegan message, but it is not counter to a vegan message because and if you say you want to be vegan, but you're not becoming vegan because you can't give up cheese, then I would say, well, then do everything else except cheese for now. At least start somewhere. The biggest way we sabotage ourselves, I think, is by not doing anything at all because we think if we can't do everything, we should do nothing. And it makes absolutely no sense. So we need to stop sabotaging ourselves and at least start with where we're at, right? So a lot of people say, yeah, I don't really care about meat. I don't really eat a lot of meat. Everybody says they don't eat a lot of meat. I don't really care about eggs, whatever they say. But then they say, but I could never give up cheese. Well, then if you could give up everything except cheese, start there. Does that make sense? So start with where you're at, and you'll find that as you're doing that, you will discover things along the way that will guide you and help you and inspire you to keep going. So that's the number one thing I want to say. Good, makes sense. Reduce. It's not even just reduce. It's just like start with where you're at. Like if you really genuinely say that you could let go of meat and and cow's milk, liquid cow's milk, and eggs and everything else, but cheese is something you're really holding on to, then at least just start somewhere. Don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. Exactly, Muse of the Poets. I don't know how you typed that so fast. That's very impressive. So that's the first thing I want to say. And if you're liking what you hear, you can share this right away. You can just swipe up on your Android. You can swipe to the right on your iPhone, and you can invite people to join us right now, because of course this is information that's relevant for everybody. And if you're watching the rebroadcast, you can also send hearts and you can also share with people, and the broadcast will be available for 24 hours here on Periscope. So cheese has been your last holdout for years. Okay, well then maybe it's time to really look in the mirror and say, can I start letting go of it? Like, am I ready now? What I really find about the don't do nothing because you can't do everything is that I find that people don't tend to use that as an excuse to not give up cheese. It gives them the freedom to say, you're right, I could start somewhere. And then in starting there, they actually find that they can let go of cheese. And that would be another thing I would say. This isn't a tip. This isn't on my list of tips. But I would say, yes, you can. It's not that great. And we'll get to why people think it is great and why it's not that great. But yes, you can. Of course you can. We shouldn't let anything have such a hold on us that we're actually not living according to our own values, because this thing holds on to us so strongly that we think that we act like it controls us. And we really do act like that when it comes to dairy-based cheese. So someone who asked you what vegan is, yeah, some people are answering. We talked about it in defining vegan. We did a scope the other day, and basically it's just, someone who's vegetarian doesn't eat the flesh of animals, someone who's vegan doesn't eat the flesh or secretions of an animal or anything that comes off of or out of an animal, and it's done because we don't want to contribute to violence against animals, and so that includes cheese and eggs and cow's milk, and then of course wool and silk and other things that come from an animal. The multicolored hearts remind you of fruits and veggies, says Blake. I know, it's so lovely, all of your hearts, I love it. I love the multicolors, it's coming from all of you. I love it. So okay, number one makes sense. Don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. So if you say that you can't give up cheese, but you could give up everything else, then give up everything else and start there. Okay? That's number one. Number one. Any questions about that? You can share D by swiping left to right on your iPhone or up on your Android, and you'll get the page that says share, and then you can share it with whomever you like. You love my non-judgmental attitude. Thank you, Serena. I appreciate that. And you love the hearts, too. Perfect Sense Cowhugger says, and I do Periscope. Do I Periscope on what I eat every day, Mrs. Tyree? No, it'd be really boring if I Periscoped on what I eat every day, honestly. I eat simply, I do, I'll scope some of the things that I eat, but not every day, because that would be boring. And I'm not trying to impress anybody, so my lunch might not impress you, and so it might backfire. I had like some chickpeas yesterday with some carrots. I think that was my lunch. So that could backfire. If I did it, wouldn't be boring. If I did it, it wouldn't be boring. Well, I don't know about that. Okay, thanks, Blake. So number one. Number two is, I want to just talk a little bit about why we think cheese has such a hold on us, or why I think cheese has such a hold on us. And I want you to stay with me here because I want this to make sense to you, because I think this is at the heart of why cheese has such a hold on us. I think one of the things that happens is, in this culture we live in, cheese is such a huge part of our food, right? A part of our food culture. And so it's part of our lives from very early on. And so it becomes part of our repertoire. It becomes part of our memories. It becomes part of our history. It becomes part of our relationships. And so what happens is, I think, as we get older and we choose the foods we're choosing, and so many of them are based on habits, we are choosing the things that are most familiar and trigger the most satisfying and pleasurable emotions. And look, cheese is incorporated into our holidays, into our meals, into our family gatherings, into our occasions. So it actually is part of all of these memories. And I think what we do is mistake the feeling we get when we think about cheese with the cheese itself. In other words, we confuse the form. The cheese is the form, but I think what we're really going for is the effect of what we get. It might be comfort. It might be nostalgia. It might be, a memory. It might be we remember our grandmother who made our favorite macaroni and cheese. It might be the grilled cheese sandwiches we had on rainy days when we had off from school. My point is that it triggers all of these emotions and these memories, that's really what means more to us than the cheese itself. And the reason I say that is because if we grew up in a culture where cheese wasn't such a huge factor in our food, in our food culture, it would be something else. It would be a different food because cheese is not in every culture. Yes, people are saying it's everywhere in Niagara Falls and Canada. Of course it is in the Midwest. I grew up on it on the East Coast. It is everywhere. There is a huge political component to this, and there's a huge mercenary component to this because, of course, the cheese industry has such a huge it's such a huge moneymaker. And yes, so of course in Asia, for instance, cheese is not eaten in Asia, or dairy-based cheese is not. And there are other foods that trigger emotions there. So I'm not discounting the power, the political power that the cheese industry and the dairy industry has on industry and on us publicly as consumers. Of course, that's a huge part of it. But what I'm trying to offer you is a way to let go of your own emotional attachments to cheese and say it really has less to do with cheese than it does the emotions that surround it and the memories. So, of course, there are also studies that indicate that the casomorphine in cheese which is the protein in cheese, acts like morphine in our own bodies. And so there's a pleasure response. That's part of it as well. But I do think all of that plays into the point I'm making, which is it's the pleasure we're trying to achieve. It's not necessarily the cheese itself. Does that make sense? So yes, like I said, there is an addictive component to cheese. There is evidence of that, but part of what I'm trying to say is that when we think about the ways in which we eat cheese and the feeling we get when we think about it and the attachment we have to it, some of it's emotional. It's not just physiological. It makes people feel happy, right? And that could possibly be the casomorphines, and I think it's also the memories that are triggered when we think about cheese. It's this comfort food for us. And so all I'm trying to say is I want to offer you the possibility of thinking about what it is you want to achieve, if it's comfort, if it's nostalgia, if it's happiness, that we go seek those emotions out in a different form than cheese. Does that make sense? So it's just offering you a new way to think about it, and it's offering you a different way to change that habit so that we're not so beholden to this product, to this animal product. So does that make sense, everybody? Does that make sense to you? You don't have to agree. It's just my opinion, and it's just my thought, and I just wanted to throw that out there. It's not right or wrong. It's just some food for thought, if you will. Casein is a milk protein. It's not vegan. That's right. Good point. Of course, addiction and comfort, right? Debbie, thanks for that. Okay, it makes sense to you guys. My mom ate cheese and crackers with me when she was pregnant. Let me tell you something. The habits that are there's so much evidence that we form so many habits once we're out of the womb based on what happened in the womb. We need not discount that. We can't discount that. It plays a huge role, and more evidence is coming out to demonstrate that. Been meditating on this exact thing, says Blake. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's just, again, food for thought. It's just one factor, okay? Not right or wrong, but that's just one idea. So number one, don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Number two, seek out the feeling rather than the form of that feeling. Find a new form for the comfort that you might be seeking out. Thank you, Kels. I appreciate that. I don't even miss cheese now. It's full of fat anyway. Well, Serena, that's actually a very good segue into point number 3. Are you guys ready for number 3? If you're just joining us, welcome. You can tap on your screen if you like what you hear, and if you want to send some hearts, it's a wonderful way for me to know that what I'm saying makes sense. And it's also a ranking system that Periscope uses, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Thank you for your hearts. So I'm watching you guys, but I want to just make sure that everybody knows you're welcome here. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about one of the biggest reasons I hear people, the biggest excuse I hear people use for not being vegan, and I want to talk about some of the ways that you can possibly let go of that. And if you're just joining us, you can swipe left to right on your iPhone, and you can swipe up on your Android to encourage people to join us. So again, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau from Joyful Vegan here. I have a friend who's so afraid of soy since being diagnosed with cancer, but she eats so much dairy. Yep, that's a problem. That's absolutely a problem. Not a fan of nooch. We'll talk about nutritional yeast. Not everybody knows what nooch is. I didn't. There was a time some friend was talking about nooch. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. until I discovered it. Okay, so we got number 1 and we got number 2. Everybody good? Are you ready to move on to number 3? Okay. Good. All right, we're ready to move on to number 3. Number 3. Thanks, Levy Nature. Nooch for the win. I'm addicted to nooch. Okay, can we get off the nooch for just a moment? I just asked my girlfriend today if there's such a thing as string cheese. I miss it, says Mario. Okay. Read the China study. Number 3. Okay, number 3. Let's get to number 3. Number 3 is, aside from everything I just said about comfort, because that's one element, cheese is all about fat and salt and flavor and texture and familiarity. So I think we covered the familiarity because that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the comfort and the memory and the nostalgia. But when it comes down to when people say, I crave meat, I crave cheese, it really has to do with craving fat and salt. That's what cheese is, or a certain mouthfeel, or a certain texture. So what I recommend people do is think about what it is that you're craving. If it's fat, if it's salt, if it's something creamy, if it's something pungent, if it's something sharp, then seek out the form of that craving, right? So for instance, one of the things I recommend for Parmesan cheese. So when you have pasta and you want to put Parmesan cheese,